In today's video, I'm going to explain how this student dropped 6 shots off his handicap this year, simply focusing on 3 different areas of his game. And these 3 areas just may help you improve as well. Let's get to it. So I was just sitting down to do a yearly review with one of my students, and I thought this would make a great video and potentially helpful for all of you guys out there. So it is a little peek behind the curtain, a little behind the scenes look at me as a coach and how I work with my long-term developmental program students. This particular student is an in-person student that I see at my club that I work at, but also I do this with my long-term remote coaching students as well. So this particular player knocked 6 shots off his handicap this year, which obviously is amazing. And that doesn't happen with everybody, but I want to show you why and how this particular student knocked these shots off. Plus, he added 25 yards on average carry with his driver and subsequently with his irons as well because of the little mechanical things that we did, or big mechanical things that we did at the end of the day. So his development, I'm breaking it down into 3 buckets. And these 3 buckets I do work on with all of my students to certain degrees. Number 1, mechanical. So I'm going to talk about what changes I made with him. Nothing crazy in the big picture, but they paid huge dividends and potentially could help you as well. The second thing is the statistical analysis. And before I scare you off with that, I am a big advocate of tracking your stats. Now, obviously, you have to have a fairly large sample size of playing in order to get a good idea of what you're doing, but I'm going to talk about that briefly as well. Then the last thing is personalized course management. I call it personalized course management as opposed to just course management. I will be doing videos coming up on general course management, but personalized course management is massively important to the development of the individual player. You have to know what they do, how they act, the decisions they make on the golf course in order to improve them. And we spent a good amount of time on that. And arguably, that could be one of the main reasons why he saw a really good drop off of his handicap, especially towards the mid-late part of the season. But before we head over to the tee and talk about this, excuse my voice, I'm coming down with something which is not good, but hopefully it goes away very quickly. My name is Valentine. I am a 25-year PGA teaching professional. My passion is to help players like you improve at this game and have a little bit more fun. If you want to learn a little bit more about me, just check the description down below. I have a little bio down there. But if you like golf instruction and you like golf content and you like learning, because I love learning. I don't know everything. I'm learning every single day. I'm learning from my students how to improve them and how to improve others. It's amazing. It's why I love what I do. But if you do enjoy this kind of stuff, consider subscribing down below. Hit that like button if you like this. And also, if you like this type of content, this kind of behind the scenes look at individual students, let me know. Hit that like button because I will do a lot more of these. I have thousands of these ultimately at the end of the day, at the end of the year, that I could do. Not necessarily these long-term development programs, but thousands of lessons that I can review and go over with you because they may resonate with you as the player. So let's head over to the tee box. Let's talk about number 1, what mechanical changes we made with him. And I'm going to show you the before and after. And I think you're going to be pretty happy with what you see. Oh, so I almost forgot to ask the question of the day. Comment below your answer. Simply, how often do you get to practice? Everybody has lives that they're living. Golf isn't necessarily, for most players, their number 1 priority. So I'm not expecting to read 5 times a week, 10 times a week, 800 times a week. But let me know, comment below. How often do you practice? I am genuinely curious. So the first thing I want to go over is we'll say the more complex piece of this puzzle, which is how did we get his mechanics? How did we get his movement patterns better so he could strike the golf ball better, hit the ball farther, generate more speed, and ultimately have more control over his golf ball? Well, as you can see by the before. Now, just to give you a little, again, peek behind the curtain, what I do in a first session, in-person session with a player is I'm trying to gather as much data as I can on this player. I will film, I will use 3D motion capture. I'll use launch monitor data, force plates, pressure mats. I'm gonna use everything that I can to capture enough data to help me make the right decisions in the right order with this particular player or any particular player that comes in and sees me. What we see visually isn't always the root cause of things. So I'm trying to dive as deep as I can without the student really knowing that I'm grabbing all of these technical data points, because that can be very, very, very overwhelming to anybody. You know, at the end of the day, you as a student would want to come in, hear a teacher like me say, do this, you leave, and you play better golf. You don't want to be overwhelmed with all of the data and all of the visuals. And I know some of you may like that, but athletically at the end of the day, that can get in the way. Now, as a coach, as a developmental coach that's trying to get this person better, I need all the information that I can possibly get my hands and eyes on to help this particular player. So what you're seeing here is simply the face-on video. I'm not gonna dive deep into everything that I captured there and bore you, but you're seeing the face-on video because it is a very obvious thing when you see this. But with the data, ultimately at impact, he was very much across the golf ball, face wide open. Part of the reason why he hit it short. I'm gonna put that aside a second here. So as you can see, he had a lot of lateral motion with the lower body, specifically the lead knee. As he takes that club off of the golf ball, that lead knee kicks in significantly. When that lead knee kicks in significantly, the hips, the upper body, the chest all start to open in this direction pretty significantly. Now the hands get very deep, so if I show you from this angle, the hands get very deep. So the hands were getting very much behind him at this point. He didn't have enough time to deliver the club in a halfway decent position. He had to throw the club, we'll call it over the top at that point, to recover. He is a good athlete. He has played golf in the past, but not to the point where he did this year. This year he took it extremely serious, and he could manage hitting a golf ball that way, albeit not that consistent and not that far, but he could manage. His brain, his body, his athleticism kind of kicked in, and he got the club to the golf ball. But at what cost? Distance, contact, all of that good stuff. So the first thing I have to check is, well, number one, why is this player doing this? Is there a physical limitation piece, or is it just because that is what he does and he feels comfortable with? So I ran a very simple test that I've talked about in other videos to see the hip mobility, to see if he had any restrictions. And it wasn't terrible, but it definitely could be better. And after this conversation, I kind of directed him to a TPI trainer, a TPI certified trainer, to help his body out. And I'm happy to say he's been working really hard with that trainer, which is helping him in many ways, not just the mobility piece. So if you are dealing with some sort of physical limitations, and I know a lot of players do, don't be afraid to go reach out to a physical therapist, to a trainer, to somebody that is certified in this to help you out. It could make a world of difference at the end of the day. So a couple things that we did day one. We worked on his setup, and I do this with, for the most part, everybody. There is nothing wrong ever, ever, ever with working on your core basics, your setup, your grip, your posture, all of those things. Because if one of those things start to go a little sour, it's gonna have a domino effect on everything else. So I got him to understand that we need to be more toe to heel balanced at address. Got him to understand that he needs to have good posture from his hip sockets as opposed to from his upper body. I got him to understand that his arms, specifically with his irons, need to hang from his shoulder joints. He was reaching a lot. I did get his grip in a little more of a neutral position. I'm not gonna go deep into these individual things here, but I just want to explain the things that I did with him off the start. Now, ultimately, we have to look at the biggest issue. It is that knee kicking in. It is the over rotation of the hips, which leads to a lot of other things. So I left him the first session with one exercise. I wanted him to take the club off of the golf ball and create a nice simple rotation of that trail hip in, and that's all I wanted him to do. And in the session, what he started to do is he started to synchronize his body differently. He put his brain on this move, which eliminated this move right here. So it got his pattern off to a good start. I've said this before in other videos, and I say this all the time. If we don't have that first move in a good place, everything else is just going to be a compensation. And compensations, there are great players out there that play with what I would call compensations. There's no question about it. But if we can eliminate it, especially with a player coming in with a 22 handicap, if we can eliminate some of these things and make the golf swing more efficient, it's going to turn out something like this. So I know I skipped over a lot of the in-between, the 8 months in between that we were working on, but I just wanted to show you the before and how we started this to where we ended this particular season with his golf swing. So as you can see, a much better move off of the golf ball, a more stable body position overall. He's in a position now where he has a chance to deliver the club in a much more neutral position. He has a chance, because of the slight grip tweak that we did and him understanding where the club face needs to be dynamically, to deliver the club with a more neutral club face relative to a neutral path. We have work to do going forward with his golf swing. There's no way around that. Nobody has a mechanically perfect golf swing. There's always things that you can tighten up. As you get better and the swing gets better, it gets tougher. It gets tougher to make those incremental changes. But with a student like this, where he had, let's face it, a lot of low-hanging fruit to get better, this is part of the reason why he saw his ball striking improve significantly. And ultimately, that change led him to strike the ball much better with a path less from the outside, increasing his ball speed and his distance. But let's move on to the stats and the course management and how those two guys intertwine with lowering his handicap as well. As a coach, I encourage all of my students to track their stats. Now, I don't mean just getting greens in regulation, how many putts you have per round, how many fairways you hit. I mean a detailed dive into your stats. And there are tools out there that you can get to capture this data. Arcos, ShotScope, Garmin, all have systems that track every shot that you hit on the golf course and then put them into their dashboard and give you a really detailed look on where your strengths and weaknesses are and what areas of the golf course you're strong at, what areas you're weak at. And it really helps you with your course management decisions, which is why the stat tracking piece of this particular player kind of blends into their personalized course management piece that I was referring to earlier. Now, you've also heard me say, what you can measure, you can get better. If you're not measuring this stuff, everything else is just anecdotal. Everything else is just a guess. I don't like guessing. I need to have these facts in order to formulate the best plans for my students. So I encourage you, take a look at Arcos, ShotScope, if you're not familiar with those, the Garmin stat tracking system. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Now, this particular player, I'm not gonna go through his entire dashboard here, but I am going to point out a big piece of the puzzle that I bet a lot of you out there struggle with, and you may not even realize it, and it's hurting your score, and it's hurting your handicap. It's preventing you from lowering your handicap, and it has to do with approach shot accuracy. So if you take a look at this basic graph right here, now this is the end of the season graph. 12% of his shots he misses to the right of the green. 10% to the left. Now, if I isolated just the first 2 months of his data gathering, he had a lot more shots missed to the right, and that had everything to do with the swing mechanics that I was talking about at the beginning. And I said because of his move, he had more of an over-the-top move, which leads to the high right misses on average. As the swing progressed and got better, he got that miss pattern to be much tighter, which is awesome. He also got his north-south miss pattern much tighter. But with that said, if I go to the shots plotted here, You'll notice these are all the shots that he gathered, all of his approach shots. These are all his literal shots. So the orange is a miss green, and the green is a hit green in regulation. Notice where majority of the orange balls are. They're short of the green. Go back to the overview. 41% of his shots that he missed short. 5% long. I'd put a lot of money on the table that a high majority of you out there deal with the same thing. Now, this can come from multiple things. It can come from the strike. It can come from club choice. It can come from, again, where you're hitting it on the, there's a lot of variables. Not understanding how elevation can change your distance. There's a lot of variables here. So how did I use this data to help this particular player with his course management? Well, I've talked about this in other videos. So as we went along during the summer, I am constantly tracking his distances with his clubs. And I'm not just tracking how ultimately far they go on average, I'm talking about how long does the 7-iron go, but how short does the 7-iron go, even when he's hitting it okay. We're not gonna hit the ball the same exact distance every single time. So as I gathered enough of that data, I started using that data for him from a course management standpoint to aim for certain parts of the green. Now, I'm gonna be very general here, but again, I guarantee this is gonna help a majority of you players out there. If you aimed middle to back of the green as your number, you are going to hit more greens. Why? It goes back to this. Majority of golf shots are missed short. And most of the time, let's be real, people are aiming at pins. And half the time, the pins can be on the front side of the green, or the philosophy of I have to be below the pin. I hate to say it, most players are not good enough, don't have the precision to hit the ball below the pin. And ultimately, they end up short. So I encourage you out there, just like I encourage this student, start aiming for the middle back as your dispersion window. I promise you, you will hit more greens overall. Ultimately, this number has gotten better since we talked about that. He has hit more greens in regulation. Course management at the end of the day and how it relates to your score. If you hit more greens, you will lower your score. So at the end of the day, don't just limit yourself to making your golf swing better. It is a very important piece of the puzzle. There is no question about that. But you have to look at other pieces of your game if you want to shave those extra shots off. You can strike the ball as good as anybody, but if you don't know where your on-course weaknesses are and you don't know how to attack those weaknesses, you're limiting yourself to how good you can be. And I promise you, every one of you out there can improve your game. You have to look at your game holistically, not just golf swing, to make you better.